Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really fundamental question. What exactly is the purpose of our minds and brains? We've got a fascinating piece of research as our starting point, a paper called What is the Function of Mind and Brain by David C. Geary.
Absolutely. And what makes this paper so compelling, I think, is that it shifts the focus. It's
Yeah.
not just describing what our brains do, all those cognitive functions we talk about, but exploring the deeper evolutionary reasons why they develop that way.
Mm-hmm.
The author, Geary, argues that truly understanding this underlying function could, potentially revolutionize fields like education and cognitive neuroscience.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to really try and get to the core evolutionary imperatives, the things that shaped our minds and brains. We want to move beyond just like listing cognitive abilities and understand the fundamental why behind it all.
And the paper really grabs you right from the start, posing this huge question: what is the function of mind and brain? It sounds almost simple, maybe. But the author draws this brilliant parallel. Think about biology. Understanding the function of organs, say the heart or kidneys, that led to massive breakthroughs in medicine. The argument here is similar. If we really grasp the core function of the mind and brain, we could see similar leaps in understanding cognition and especially learning.
Okay, so this big question is out there. What is the function? How do we even start to answer something so fundamental? That's where evolutionary psychology comes in. Right?
Exactly. Evolutionary psychology gives us a framework, a lens, for thinking about how natural selection might have molded our psychological traits over, vast periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's true, this field sometimes faces criticism. Some people suggest its explanations are just convenient just-so stories, explanations made up after the fact, without real proof.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that skepticism. So how does this paper make its case in a way that tries to move beyond those just-so stories?
Well, the author really emphasizes using comparative methods. He argues this is a much more robust scientific approach. It's all about looking across different species, examining how their brain structures and behaviors relate to the specific ecological challenges they face in their environments.
The comparative approach, okay, that sounds like a smart way to tackle it. Can you walk us through an example of how this works?
Sure, let's take animals that store food. You have what are called larder hoarders. These are animals that keep all their food in one spot, or maybe a few central spots.
Okay.
Their memory doesn't necessarily need to be amazing for remembering lots of locations, but they absolutely need to be good at defending that single stash. Then you have scatter hoarders, creatures that hide bits of food in tons of different dispersed places.
Oh, okay. Different strategy.
Totally different.
Okay.
They don't have one big store to protect, but their spatial memory has to be incredibly sharp to remember all those hiding spots.
Right. Okay. Two very different survival strategies. So when scientists look at the brains of these different kinds of hoarders, what do they actually find?
This is where it gets really cool. Neurobiological studies have pretty consistently shown that scatter-hoarding bird species, the ones hiding food everywhere, have a significantly larger hippocampus compared to their larder-hoarding relatives.
Hippocampus, that's the memory bit, right? Spatial memory.
Exactly. Crucial brain region for spatial memory and navigation.
Yeah.
So this strongly suggests that the environmental pressure, the need to remember many food locations, actually drove the evolutionary development of a larger hippocampus in those species. It's a direct link.
Wow, that's a really clear connection.
Mhm.
Environment, behavior, brain structure. Are there other comparisons like that in the paper across different species?
Absolutely. Another fascinating one involves the sensory systems of primates. If you compare primate species active at night nocturnal ones with those active during the day diurnal species, you see some pretty striking differences.
Okay, like what?
Nocturnal primates tend to have much better olfactory systems, a keener sense of smell. Makes sense for navigating and finding food in the dark, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Diurnal primates, on the other hand, typically have much better visual systems. Again, obviously more advantageous for foraging in daylight. It's another really elegant example of sensory adaptations evolving to meet specific environmental demands.
So smell for the night shift, vision for the day crew, it's all very logical, connected to survival. Now, the paper also gets into the neocortex in primates. That's the winkly outer bit, right? More complex thinking.
Exactly, the highly developed outer layer associated with more complex cognitive abilities. And research has found that the relative size of the neocortex in different primate species is independently linked to two key things: the typical size of their social groups and their main diet.
Social group size and diet. Huh, how so?
Well, after you account for things like overall body size and how
Yeah.
closely related the species are, which helps isolate the specific effects, Primates living in larger social groups tend to have a larger neocortex. And also, primates that eat mostly fruit tend to have a larger neocortex compared to those that mainly eat leaves.
Okay, let's break that down. Why would social group size matter for neocortex size?
The main idea is that larger social groups just present a more complex social world. You've got more individuals to recognize, more relationships to track, more intricate social dynamics, alliances, competition.
Right, a lot more social information to process.
Exactly. A larger neocortex likely provides the increased processing power needed to manage all that social complexity. And as for diet, finding and assessing ripe fruit is generally seen as more cognitively demanding than just munching on leaves, which are more abundant and require less judgment.
Makes sense. You need to remember where the fruit trees are, figure out if the fruit is ripe, maybe even compete for it.
Precisely. So all these comparisons across species, the hoarders, the primate senses, the neocortex links, they point towards an overarching conclusion.
Which is?
The paper argues, quite persuasively I think, that the comparative approach strongly suggests the primary function of the mind and brain, across a very wide range of species, is to process crucial information related to three core domains.
Okay, what are...
First, conspecifics, that is, information about other members of your own species, their behavior, social dynamics. Second, biological resources and threats, things like food, predators, potential mates. And third, the physical environment essential for navigation, finding shelter, avoiding dangers.
Conspecifics, resource threats, environment. Okay. And the author draws a really interesting line from these basic needs to how humans seem to naturally understand the world, doesn't he?
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting for us. These three fundamental domains, social info, biological stuff, physical world, they seem to align remarkably well with what look like universal human ways of understanding the world.
You mean like instinct?
Kind of what we often call folk psychology, our intuitive grasp of other people's minds, intentions, motivations. Then there's folk biology, our sort of innate way of categorizing and thinking about plants and animals. And intuitive physics, our basic, unlearned sense of how objects move and interact.
So the idea is that these folk understandings aren't just random, they map onto those core survival domains.
It seems highly probable, yeah. That alignment likely isn't just a coincidence, but reflects the deep evolutionary roots of these fundamental human intuitions. Our brains are sort of pre-wired to care about and process this specific kind of information.
Right, it's almost as if our brains came preloaded with an operating system focused on people, nature, and physics, because that was critical for survival way back when.
Oh.
Okay, let's zoom in specifically on humans then. How does this evolutionary perspective illuminate our own minds and brains?
Well, by combining the insights from that comparative approach with the fossil record of our hominid ancestors, we can start to piece together the evolutionary story of the human mind. And one of the most dramatic things is the massive increase in hominid brain volume. Since Australopithecus afarensis just a few million years ago, it's roughly tripled.
Tripled, that's huge. What does the paper suggest drove that expansion?
Given that strong link we just talked about between brain volume and social group size complexity in primates, it's highly likely that the increasing complexity of social life played a really significant role in our own brain evolution.
So bigger, more complex societies needed bigger brains to manage them.
That's the leading hypothesis. And when you compare human social abilities to our closest living relatives, like chimpanzees, you see some key differences that likely evolved. Humans developed language, this incredibly powerful tool for social communication, cooperation, teaching. And we also evolved a much more elaborate theory of mind. That's the ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, intentions, beliefs, which might be different from ours.
Humans have some of that, don't they? But not like us.
Exactly. Chimpanzees show some basic signs, but it's far less developed than in humans. Our ability to mentalize, to understand others' mental states, is absolutely vital for navigating the incredibly complex social interactions we engage in.
So the story seems to be our social worlds got more intricate, and our brains evolved to handle those demands, developing things like language and a better theory of mind along the way.
That's the general picture, yes. From this viewpoint, a primary function, maybe not the only one, but a really central one of the human mind and brain, is to effectively regulate and manage these complex social relationships.
And understanding this has big implications for how we even study the brain, right? Like in cognitive neuroscience.
Absolutely. The paper makes a strong point. If language, for instance, evolved primarily for social functions, coordinating, sharing information, influencing others, then studying it just as word processing in isolation might miss a huge part of its fundamental purpose and the brain systems involved.
You're missing the context.
Right. And similarly, the fact that folk biology seems universal suggests that investigating the neural processes we use to categorize plants and animals could be a really fruitful area of research, revealing basic cognitive mechanisms.
Okay, so our brains are fundamentally wired for the social, natural, and physical worlds. That shaped our abilities. Now, what about how our minds and brains develop? Throughout our lives, does evolution shed light on that too?
It certainly does. From an evolutionary standpoint, the purpose of development of childhood is basically to allow our cognitive abilities to adapt and get fine-tuned to the specific local conditions we grow up in. Language acquisition is a classic example.
Right. We're born ready for any language, but we specialize.
Precisely. Newborns can perceive and respond to all the basic sound units, the phones, across all human languages. Even sounds not in their parents' language. Their neural and perceptual systems provide this broad, universal foundation.
But then what happens?
Through exposure, just hearing a specific language during that crucial first year or so, their system undergoes perceptual narrowing. They get better and better at distinguishing the sounds of their native language and actually lose the ability to easily distinguish sounds that aren't relevant to it.
So experience sculpts the brain, trimming away what's not needed for the local environment.
That's a great way to put it. The paper links this to Ernst Mayr's idea of open programs versus closed genetic programs. Open programs are like initial blueprints that need environmental input to be fully built out.
And that takes time.
Exactly. And the long period of parental care in humans provides that crucial window for learning. Time to learn about local dangers, food sources, social rules, all the specifics of your environment.
And this connects to the idea of innate but skeletal knowledge.
Yes, the concept is we're born with these foundational frameworks, skeletal structures for evolved abilities, but they need experience to get fleshed out. This skeletal knowledge biases what we pay attention to, how we process things, and motivates us to engage with the world in ways that help develop our folk psychology, folk biology, and intuitive physics.
So we have predispositions, but experience fills in the details. Now, the paper also talks about how childhood itself evolved, its duration. That seems really relevant here.
It is very relevant. Looking at the fossil record, early hominids like Australopithecus and Homo habilis seem to have matured around the same age as chimps, maybe 9 or 10 years old.
Okay.
But then we see a shift with Homo erectus. They seem to have matured later, maybe 12 or 13. And of course, modern humans mature even later, well into our teens or early 20s, depending on how you measure it.
That's a significant lengthening of childhood. Why would that happen?
Well, research by Lee and others points to a distinct period of slow physical growth in human kids, especially between about 6 and 10 years old. This suggests a specific lengthening of childhood proper, the time before puberty. And across primates, there's this strong correlation. Longer childhood goes with larger neocortex size and more complex social systems.
Back to the social complexity idea. More time needed to learn the social ropes.
Precisely. The paper proposes that a primary function of our extended childhood is to provide the time and experiences through play, exploration, social interaction needed to adapt our flexible brain systems, especially those for social competence, to the specific local social environment.
So childhood play isn't just fun, it's crucial brain development for social life.
Very likely. The author even suggests that maybe the primary motivation of school-age kids isn't academic learning per se, but their inherent drive to engage in social discourse, to figure out the social world and hone those sociocognitive skills.
That's a really interesting perspective on what drives kids in school, not just grades, but social navigation. And this evolutionary view has implications for education practice, doesn't it? Especially around ideas like developmental readiness and motivation.
Yes, drawing on work by Burns and Fox, the paper questions whether developmental readiness applies in the same way to school subjects like reading and math, which are evolutionarily novel, compared to evolved skills like talking.
How so?
Our brains become ready for learning things crucial for ancestral survival, social understanding, navigating, language. They aren't inherently ready for algebra or decoding written symbols in the same biological sense.
So saying a child isn't ready for reading might be missing the point. It's not like waiting for them to be ready to walk.
That's the argument. Age obviously matters for learning complex things, but attributing struggle solely to a lack of readiness without understanding the maturation of the underlying primary systems that get co-opted for reading or math could be misleading.
So how do we know when kids are ready?
The paper suggests it's really an empirical question for educational research. Maybe brain imaging studies tracking development could help identify optimal windows, but ultimately, figuring out the best timing and methods for teaching these non-evolved skills is a job for educators and researchers, not just assuming a fixed biological timetable based on age alone.
Okay, that makes sense. What about motivation? How does the evolutionary perspective reframe motivation in school?
It draws a key distinction. We have this implicit, built-in motivation to learn about the social, biological, and physical world, things directly relevant to survival in our past. Learning school subjects often requires more extrinsic motivation, or at least motivation driven by cultural values rather than innate drive.
So natural curiosity might drive kids to explore outside or figure out friendships, but maybe not calculus homework.
Pretty much. While many kids are motivated to learn in school, the argument is that universal education in these evolutionarily secondary skills can't rely solely on that natural curiosity. Our drive for primary evolved goals is likely more universal and powerful.
And that has implications.
Two main ones, according to the paper. First, given a choice, people will likely prioritize those primary goals: social connection, understanding their immediate world. Second, achieving universal education in things like literacy and numeracy requires cultural emphasis, requires us to value these skills, and often involves consciously redirecting effort away from more inherently motivating primary activities toward these secondary academic ones.
Wow, that really highlights the challenge. Formal education is, in a way, asking us to work against some of our deepest evolutionary programming.
In some ways, yes, or at least to co-opt that programming for new purposes.
Hmm.
And understanding the tension is crucial if we want to make education more effective, maybe more engaging.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. What's the big takeaway message from this deep dive, looking at the mind and brain through this evolutionary lens?
The core idea is that evolution primarily shaped our minds and brains to be really good at navigating social complexities, understanding the living world around us, and interacting effectively with our physical environment. Those were the make-or-break skills for survival and reproduction for most of our history.
Mm-hmm.
Folk psychology, folk biology, intuitive physics, these aren't just quirks. They reflect those deep-seated priorities.
And that really underlines the specific challenge of modern education, which is largely about teaching skills, reading, writing, higher math that are cultural inventions, things our brains didn't specifically evolve to do.
Exactly. And a huge part of that challenge is motivation. How do we effectively encourage people to invest effort in these secondary, though vital, skills when our primary evolutionary drives might be pulling us towards, say, socializing or exploring the immediate environment?
It's a fundamental tension. This has been really illuminating. It makes you rethink why we learn what we learn and how our brains are structured. It leaves me with a final thought, really.
Mm-hmm.
If we truly understand these core evolutionary drives for social connection, for understanding nature, for mastering the physical world, how might we actually reimagine education? Could we find smarter ways to tap into those inherent motivations, to kind of hijack them maybe, to make learning reading and math more engaging, more effective?
That's a fascinating question.
What if education explicitly acknowledged and even built upon our evolved tendencies, instead of sometimes feeling like it's working against them? What might that look like? It's definitely something to chew on.
Indeed. It raises some profound questions about the nature of learning and how we can best structure it in our modern world, respecting both our evolutionary heritage and our current needs.